Hi everyone, Blocks here. In this video I'm going to show you how to make a simple shop GUI that will give you a tool in Roblox Studio. So you'll be able to have a shop and it will save the tools, it will save your cache, it will also give you feedback. If you click the button and you already own the item, it's going to go red, but if you don't already own the item and the purchase was successful, it's going to go green. So lots to learn in this video, so keep watching. Can I also remind you that I have a star code on Roblox, so if you're enjoying my videos, you're finding them useful, and you want to support my channel at no extra cost when you're buying Robux or Premium, you can use the star code AlvinBlocks at the checkout, and that way I'll receive a commission and it will support the channel at no extra cost to you. Thank you. The first thing which we're going to do is create our GUI. So in the starter GUI, click on the plus and insert a screen GUI. I'm going to name mine shop. And inside of there, I'm going to add a frame. Now, this frame, I'm going to set the size. So I'm going to set the scale on the X and Y axis so that it scales with the screen size. So when it gets smaller, then the shop GUI will also get smaller. But if the screen gets bigger, it will also increase. So we can set the size property to 0.5, 0, 0.25, 0. In fact, I'll change the 0.25 to around 0.6. There we go. Then I'm going to set the anchor point to 0.5, 0.5. This means that when you set the position value, the position will be set in the middle of the frame, so it's perfectly centered. So I can then set the position property to 0.5, 0, 0.5, 0. This puts it in the middle on the X and Y axis. So now it's in the middle of our screen. And you can see when I make my screen smaller, that you can see that the GUI scales with it. That's because we're using the scale properties, not the offset properties. So once we've done that, we're going to insert a UI grid layout. And this means that any GUI elements inside of this frame will get ordered into a grid. The next thing I'm going to do is create a template frame. This template frame is going to it's going to show the tools that we have, and for each tool we'll copy it and change the text inside the frame to the tool's name, etc. So I'm going to name this frame template, and I'm going to go into the UI grid layout here. And in fact, you can add a few more frames just to see what it looks like. I'm going to go into the UI grid layout and I'm going to change the cell size because currently it's using offset. We want to be using scale so that it again scales with the size of the GUI. So I'm going to set it to around 0.1, so it takes up a tenth of the frame size on the x-axis, and again the same for the y-axis. And I need to make it a little bit longer on the y-axis, so let's try 0.2. Perfect. So now we've got the grids set up like that. In fact, I might just change it to 0.25 so that it's a little bit wider. There we go, that works with me. So now what will happen is whenever I add a new template, if it can't fit on the end of the row, it will create a new row for us and they'll all fit in like this. So I'm going to add a few more just to see if it fits perfectly. And so we've got a bit of clipping. So I'm going to set my frame, I'm going to set clip descendants to be true so that it doesn't show any items that are outside of the frame. And if you want it to be a scrolling frame, just insert a scrolling frame instead of a normal frame and put everything inside of there. So I'm just going to go back into the UI grid layout, and I'm going to change the horizontal alignment to center. I'm also going to change the cell padding to 0.05, 0, 0.05, 0. Again, this is using scale. So what will happen is that will dynamically change when the size of the GUI changes. So now that we've got our grid basically of items, in fact I'm not too happy with that because it's just a grid and there's nothing else, there's no padding at the sides. So I'm going to set the fill direction max cells to be 5, so there can only be 5 cells on each row. Then I'm going to set the horizontal alignment to be centered and also the vertical alignment to be centered. So now it looks a little bit nicer. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to delete all of the frames, all of the template frames apart from one, so we can customize what it looks like. Now, if you want to, you can You can change the vertical alignment if you want them to start at the top or you want them to start at the bottom. I'm going to keep mine at the top. So I'm going to customize my template now. I'm going to firstly change the actual frame to make it look a bit better. I'm going to change the style to be drop shadow. Then I'm going to change the border size pixel to be 3, so we've got a bit of a border on here. And I'm going to change that to be a light blue color. And then I can put a viewport frame in there. I'm going to set the scale of that viewport frame to take up the entirety of the frame it's inside of by setting the size to 1,0, 1,0. So that will fill the X and Y axis because it's scale. And I'm also going to set the background transparency to be 1. Now, what we can do is begin scripting it. So I'm going to create some tools and I'm going to put them in the server storage. I'm going to create a folder. In fact, I'll put the folder in the replicated storage so we can see it on the client and we can get all the information about the tools. And I'm going to call this folder tools, just like that. Now we need to get a load of tools. So I'm going to go to the free model section and I'm just going to insert a few tools to test. I'm going to click no when it says put it into the starter pack because we want to put it into our folder in a minute. So just get as many in as you can. We've got a gravity coil here. I'm going to delete the noob because it says delete me. And what else have we got? Let's just do sword. Okay, sword, cool. So when you've got your items, just take them and drag them into that folder. Now, we are going to insert a local script into the shop, and let's just outline what we need to do in the code. So firstly, we need to insert a template for every single item in that folder. So let's loop through everything in that tools folder and insert a template for each item. Now I'm going to insert into this template a text label, and this text label is going to be the name of the object. Now we can't name this text label just name because it will think that we're accessing its name property of the parent. So if we were to say template.name, it's thinking that we're accessing the name property of the template frame. So we'll just call it object name. I'm going to set the size because I want it to fill the entire of the X axis in the frame. So the whole of the X in the frame will be filled. So it's going to be 1,0. And then I only want it to take up about 1/10 or 2/10 of the Y axis. So when I say the Y axis, I'm only meaning this much here. So 0.2,0. Awesome. I then want it to be positioned at the bottom of the screen. So I'm going to set the position to be 0,0 because we don't need to do anything on the X axis, but then we'll do 1,0 to put it at the bottom. But then just to bring it up, because it's outside of the frame, we're going to set the anchor point. So the position is taken from the bottom of the screen. So we'll set it to 0,1. The anchor point is where the position is taken from. So if I tell the script that I want the position to be set from the bottom, then it's going to set the bottom of the GUI to be at that point, so it's still within the frame. Then I'm going to set the background transparency to be 1, and that's all we need to do. So let's loop through, as I said, the folder in replicated storage. So make a quick variable for that folder, local folder equals game.replicated storage, wait for child in case it's not already there yet, tools. Then we can say for underscore, because we don't need the I, so underscore would be the counter, but then we'll say tool in pairs, folder get children, so we're looping through every tool in that folder, and we'll say, we'll make a variable for the template frame as well, local template equals, in fact, local frame, we'll do the frame first, this frame here, equals script.parent wait for child frame. We can then get the template that's inside the frame. So frame wait for child template. Right, now we can say template clone. We'll assign that to a variable called new template. And we need to set the name of the template. So new template.name equals tool.name. Then we need to set the text of the object name text label that we just made. So new template.object_name.text equals tool.name. And then later on, we need to put the tool in the viewport frame. We'll do that in a bit. So now, if we test the game, we should see a frame for every single tool. Now I'm going to make my template a visible property false, and then when we add a new template for the proper tools, we can set the visibility of each individual frame to be true, so the template one won't show up. If you click on play, we should see it in action. Oh, my bad, we need to parent it, don't we, to the frame. So new template dot parent equals frame. Yeah, put it inside the frame. So if you click play, then you can see we now have 4 frames for our tools. In fact, I've just realized in order for us to be able to click them, the frame needs to be a text button. So very simple, all we need to do is, if you've not got a plugin that can convert the class, just insert a text button, and I'm going to name it template, and I'm just going to copy in fact I don't need to copy anything, I can just take my viewport frame and object name and put them in the template and get rid of the frame. So your template needs to be a text button, but I'm going to set the background transparency of the text button to be I'm going to keep the background transparency at 0, but I'm going to get rid of the text called button in it there. And if you want to add the border back, the border of 3, and the nice little outline, you can do that. So just make sure it's a text button, and that way we can click it. So again, I'm going to make it invisible. Visible property set to false. And what we can then do is we'll just create a event for when you click it. So we can say new template.mouse button 1 click connect function, and we're going to have a remote function. A remote function is something that you can invoke, which is basically calling it from the client, and then we can pick it up on the server and do our checks to see if you can buy the item, if you have enough money, and if you do, then the remote function can send a message back to our local script, so whether the transaction was a success or not. Whereas with a remote event, it won't be able to send anything back. So we can have some feedback, so maybe play a sound if it went well, or make the button red or green depending on whether it was a success or not. So in the replicated storage, I'm going to insert a remote function, and I'm going to call this by item, although you can call it whatever you like. So when you click this, I want to fire that or invoke that remote function. So I can say game.replicatedStorage.buyItem::invoke server. Now we're going to pick this up on the server, so we need to know the item that we've bought. So because we're going to name the item after the tool, we could either send tool.name or new template.name because they're going to be the same. But I'm going to send the name of the tool. Okay, so yeah, so when you've done that, when you click buy item, when you click the button, it will invoke this remote function, and it will send the name of the tool. So if we go to the server script service and we add a server script, so we can do the coding for when you click this button now to see if you have enough money, we can do the on server invoke event. So we can say game.replicatedStorage.buyItem.onServerInvoke equals function, no connect because it's a callback function. That means that it will trigger this function when it's invoked, and you can return things as well. So because you can return something from the function, it's going to be waiting for that function to be completed. So a lot of people also ask, why are we checking this on the server? Why are we checking if you have enough money? And it's because if you're checking on the client in your local script, because it's running on your computer, you could exploit and trick the local script into thinking you have enough money. Whereas on the server can see has the main copy of the game. You can't change things on the server. So if you try and change the amount of money you have, it'll only apply on your computer, on your end. So the local script, which is running on your computer, will think that you have enough money to buy it. Whereas on the server, even if you do change your money to 99999 cash, then the server still sees the amount that you had before. Because if you try and change something on your end, on the client, it won't take effect. Now, the on-server invoke takes an automatic argument of the player that invoked it. That's sent automatically, but we had our other argument which we sent, and that argument is the name of the item, so we'll just call it tool name. So we need to have we need to somehow give a price for each item. So by doing that, we can insert an int value into each tool here. So we can say we'll call the int value cost, and then the value of this is going to be its price. So if you wanted it to cost 500, you'd set the value to 500. But you need to make sure you have one of these in each item. So right click, copy, and then select your other tools and right click and click paste into selected. And that will paste it into every single tool. So just go ahead and update the value, change the value to however much you want each item to cost. So now that we've done that, because we know that each tool will have a cost value inside of it, we can say, we can firstly get the tool out of the folder because we've got its name. So we can say if game.replicatedStorage.tools find first child. We'll use find first child because if it isn't there, it won't cause an error. So if it finds the tool name in that folder, then we can say if, and then what we'll do is we'll actually make a variable for this, so we don't have to keep repeating ourselves. So local tool equals game.replicatedStorage find first child tool name. If the tool isn't there, this variable will be nil. So we can say if tool, then if tool find first child cost, just to make sure we have that cost value in there and you haven't forgotten it. We can then say if tool.cost.value is greater than or equal to the player's cash. We're gonna write some code that will insert a cash value into your player very soon, but for now we'll just say player.leaderstats.cash.value. Then we can say you can buy this item, and for now we will just return true. Okay, else we will return false. And if there isn't a tool, we will also return false. I'll explain this in a second. And if there is no cost value inside the tool, we will also return false. So as I said, in a remote function, you can return some data back to the local script. So when we say return, any data that comes after it, so this true or this false, will be sent back to the local script. And we can see this data if we set it as a variable. So if we set this to a variable, let's just call it result, then if it returned true, for example, then result would then be equal to true. So we could say, okay, if result is true, then we know that it was a success. Else it must have been false, so we know it went wrong. You can also, return strings or numbers or whatever. So you could send error messages, but in this case, very simple, just return either true or false. So if you've bought the item, we'll return true because we know you have enough money, and we'll write some code in a minute to put the tool in your backpack. But for now, let's just insert another script. I just like to keep things organized by having different things in different scripts. I'm going to name the first one, I'll just name it by item, and the second one will be called leader stats. Now inside of the leader stats one, I'm going to say game.players.playerAdded :connect function, and then we have an argument that's automatically sent for the player that will join the game. So we can insert a folder into this player. So instance.new folder, folder.name equals leader stats. Make sure you call it leader stats with a lowercase l, and that way just parent it to the player as well. So folder.parent equals plr, or whatever you've called your player argument. When you have a folder called leader stats, if you then create your currency value, I'm going to call it cash. So instance.new, and it's going to be an int value because it holds integers. Cash.name equals cash, and cash.parent. If you parent this to your folder called leader stats, if it's called leader stats, then it will appear on your screen in the top right corner. And then I'm going to set the value. Cash.value equals 1,000. So we'll have 1,000 cash when we begin. So we have enough money to buy everything. So now, if you go into the game, by the way, you will see that the leaderboard appears and it has your cash. So what we can now do, if we go back to our buy item script, because I've set this up before, now we have our leader stats, it will check if we have enough money, enough cash. And if we do have, well, sorry, no, that's wrong. I should be saying if tool.cost.value is less than, if your player.leaderstats.cash.value is greater than or equal to the cost of the item, you should be allowed to buy it. So we can then say if you have enough money to buy it, we need to deduct the money. So we can say player.leaderstats.cash.value equals player.leaderstats.cash.value minus tool.cost.value, like this, okay? And that will take the money away. Next, how do we put this item into your inventory so you keep it? Well, we can say local new tool, and we'll create a clone of it, equals tool:clone. And then we'll say new tool dot parent equals player dot backpack, like that. And when it goes into your backpack, then you should keep it when you reset. So let's just click it, and you can see it took away 500 cash, and I have the tool in my backpack. Now let's just reset to make sure that this actually does stay in your inventory. I'm not entirely sure if it does, so we'll just double check that. Okay, it doesn't. Okay, I know what's happening. So if you want it to come back once you've reset, then there's either two ways to do it. So you could either clone it again and create a second version of the tool, but this time put it into player.startergear. And when you put it into player.startergear, it basically is put into a saved list of tools that will go back into your backpack when you die for that specific player, but obviously it won't save. Now, I hope maybe in a future video to do a saving part, so this is a temporary version, because when you save tools, we'd probably have a folder which would which when you die would save the contents of that folder and then load it in, and that way we can keep track of all the tools that you have. But for now, this is a way for that when you buy a tool and you obviously get it, and then you reset, and then when you respawn, you will keep it because it's gone into your starter gear, and whenever you reset, it will copy everything out of the starter gear back into your backpack like that. So we know that that's working fine, and actually it's very, very easy to save the tools that you have. I'm going to show you how you can do that now. So let's insert another, in fact no, we can go into the leaderstats script and do it there. So first things first, we need to get the data store service. So local data store equals game::get service, data store service. Then we can get our data store, :get data store, and just give a name for your data store for your place. You can call it whatever you want. It's basically just naming the data store uniquely to your game. So it doesn't matter what you call it. I can call it my data store. Next, what we need to do is we need to save the player's tools when they leave. So game.players.playerRemoving. Player removing is an event which will fire a function when a player leaves the game. Just like player added, it will provide you the argument for the player that is leaving. So what we can do is we can create a table. We'll call it tools table, and we're going to loop through all of the tools in your backpack and add their names to this table. So it could be, if you had a sword and a gun, that the table would look like this. So it's the names, because you can't save objects to a data store. But what we can do is then get that data, those names, when we load into the game, and look for them in the tools folder, and then clone them into your backpack. So for underscore, tool in pairs, player.backpack: get children, do if tool, in fact, no, we can just say if game.replicated storage .tools: find first child tool.name, then so if it is an actual tool in replicated storage, then we can say tools table.insert. So insert into the tools table tool.name. And obviously tool.name is a string, so it will just insert the name of that tool into the table. And then we can write in a pcall, wrap it in a pcall function, because a pcall is if the code inside of that pcall function errors, then it won't break the script because it gets caught within the pcall. So local success, a pcall will return two values, success and an error message. So, and that's going to be equal to pcall function, like this. And there we go. Make sure you have a closing bracket on the end there, because it's got two brackets here, one pair there and another pair here. So inside of here we can say data store : set async we need to have a key. So a key uniquely identifies the player's data. This can just be their user ID. So player.userid, capital U for user and capital I for ID. Then a comma, and then we need to tell it the data we want to write to the data store under this key. So it's going to be the tools table. So we are going to save the tools table to the data store under this key. So this is the unique key which we can use to identify that data. So we know that this data has got the key of the player's user ID. So once that's saved, we can then, when a player joins the game, we can create a variable for the data. We then need another p call, so local success, comma error message equals p call function, pair of brackets on the end there, and also an end with a closing bracket needs to go here. And a lot of people ask, oh, what's the point in the p call? Well, the thing with data stores is that data stores, they can break, they can go down, they're unpredictable at times. And when they do go down, they can cause errors in your script. And if one data store error breaks the entire script, it stops it from running. So no one's data is going to save if it breaks. Whereas if we put it in a p call, if there is an error, the script won't throw it up and break the entire script. It will keep running for the rest of the players in the game. And if there is an error, then it will either say that this is false, and it will put the error message here as this variable. So success can either be true or false, and if success is true, there won't be an error message, but if success is false, error message will be populated with the string of the error message. But anyway, inside this p call, we can say data store, or we can set data to be data store :get async, and we need to give it the key to uniquely identify the data stored in there, and that is going to be the player's user ID. And of course, they might not have any data at all, so data could be nil. So we have to check if data is not nil, then we know they have some data, and we can loop through all the data in that table and copy out the tools from the replicated storage into their backpack. So for underscore comma tool name, because it's going to be the name of the tool, not a tool object, because we saved the name into the tools table. So for underscore comma tool name in pairs, looping through the data, do, and so what we'll say is if game.replicatedStorage.tools : find first child. So if it finds a tool with the name, if it finds the stored tool name in replicated storage, if there's an actual tool with the same name, then we will say, well, in fact, we'll just store this as a variable so we don't have to write it out again. So local tool equals game.replicatedStorage.tools find first child. So if the tool is actually there in the replicated storage, then we can clone it out. So local new tool equals tool : clone, new tool.parent equals player.backpack, and we'll do the same thing again. We'll clone it once more so it goes into their starter gear as well. When it goes into their starter gear, then it will be put back into the backpack when they respawn. It won't get lost. And one final thing to do is a bind to close event. So if you're the last player in the server, it's possible that the server could close down before your data gets saved. So adding a bind to close means that any code within the bind to close will be executed before the server shuts down. It delays the server from shutting down until that code is executed. So we can do game : bind to close, and then inside this function, these brackets or parentheses, we're going to do a function like this. So you should have a closing bracket on your end here. And then we'll loop through all the players left in the game. So for I, player, or underscore, it doesn't matter. We're not going to use the index variable. So I'm just going to say for underscore player in pairs, game.players : get players. We're going to loop through all the players currently left in the game, and we're going to say, well, we can just now copy this code from the player removing that's going to get their tools and put them in the tools table. But I'll change the player variable to PLR as well, so it's just consistent with the rest of the code because it's looking up the player's backpack. So this will loop through all players in the game, and it will put all of their tools into a table for each player, and then set a sync that it will store it in the player's data store. So it's basically running the player removing event for every player that's currently left in the game. If you're the last person in the game, the server might shut down before your data gets saved. Anyway, let's try this out. Now, to make sure that data stores work, firstly, publish the game. So go to File, click on Publish to Roblox, go ahead, give it a name or whatever, make sure it's published. Once you've done that, go to Game Settings at the top, click on Options, and make sure Enable Studio Access to API Services is turned on. This way, you're able to test out your data stores from Roblox Studio, because you're enabling it to access the external APIs for data stores, etc., that would only be usually available in a Roblox game. Anyway, let's buy our rocket launcher, classic sword, and gravity coil. For some reason, it didn't put the gravity coil into my backpack, but we'll check that out later on. But I've left the game. I'm going to go back into the game, and you can see it has saved the rocket launcher and the sword. Oh, I know why. It's because I ran out of money in the game. So, as well, if you want to save the amount of money that you have, that's very simple as well. But for now, let me just give myself even more cash. Give myself 5,000 cash here. And you might see that I have more tools. That's because I bought them a few more times to actually see why it wasn't working. But now I can buy my gravity coil and my pistol, etc. And they're getting added to my backpack. And I leave the game. It saves perfectly. There's a little delay just because it's delaying the server from shutting down so it can save my data since I'm the last person here. But then if I play the game again, I should have all of my tools. There you go. They're right back where they were when I left. So perfect. So how do you save your cache? Well, very simple. So go down to the player removing, and we will just copy this set async line. We're going to paste it again, but this time we're going to change the key. So I'm going to do player.userid, but then I'm going to also add on to it cache. Okay, I recommend you also do the same with your tools one, so we can know what you're saving to each key, so that you have unique keys for each. Because if you had the same key, it would overwrite your data. So I'm going to change player.userid to player.userid ... tools, so it concatenates them together. And up here, I'm going to say player.userid ... tools, like this. Okay, and then when you've done that, obviously change the tools table to player.leaderstats.cache.value. Now, obviously, if you're using a different currency name, change cache to the currency name that you're using. And then, to load it, we can create another variable for the... we'll say local cache stored. And then we'll say cache stored equals data store :get async, and the key is going to be player.userid ... cache. And then we can say if cache stored is not equal to nil, then cache.value equals cache stored. Else, if their cache data store is nil and they don't have any cache stored, we can give them a default value of 5,000. So if you want the default number of cache to be a certain number, change this. So if you wanted to give them 0 cache to begin with, set it to 0. Okay, I'm going to set it to 100. In fact, no, set it to 5,000 because we won't be able to afford anything. And also, one last thing to do, in the buy item script, we don't want people to be able to buy a tool that they already have. So what you can also do is say if tool, in this top if statement here, if tool and not player.backpack : find first child tool name, then in fact we'll say starter gear, because if they have it equipped, it will be taken out of their backpack, but it will always remain in the starter gear. So let me go in and show you again. So this time, if I try to buy, my data hasn't loaded. Oh, I know why. It's because I updated my key, because I added the tools and cache, so it would have reset. So don't worry about that. It won't do that anymore. It's just the first time because it's a brand new key. I changed it. So if I buy a rocket launcher, I can no longer buy another rocket launcher. If I buy a classic sword, I can no longer buy another classic sword. So I can get all the items, but never buy them again. You can see my cache has gone down. If I leave the game and then go and rejoin, then it's going to load them all back in. It's going to load my cache, load everything, and you can see I still can't buy it. Okay, very last thing. How do we make the items appear in the viewport frame? Very simple. So click on stop and go back to the local script. Now, what we need to do is we need to clone the object out of replicated storage and into the viewport frame. So local object equals local object equals tool : clone, because tool is the object. Then object.parent, we're going to parent it to the viewport frame, equals new template dot viewport frame. Then we need to create a camera so that it can look at the item and we can tell the viewport frame which camera is going to be looking at it so it can start rendering. Local camera equals instance.new camera, camera.cframe equals, it's going to be object dot let's think about this. So each tool is going to need to have a part named handle, okay? Make sure every single tool has a part named handle. They usually do, but make sure you have one called handle. Object.handle.cframe, okay? Object.handle.cframe, and then we'll say plus object.handle.cframe.lookVector times 5. Okay, that is going to basically add 5 studs on from its forward facing direction, and we'll put it in a cframe.new. So cframe.new, so this will be the position where the camera is, and then we'll do a comma, and we're going to then tell the script what it's going to be looking at. So when we tell the script where the camera will be positioned, so imagine that this is our item and this is our camera. Really bad at drawing of a camera, but firstly we're telling it where it's positioned, so here, but then we're also telling it where to look at. So is it going to be looking here or is it going to be looking here? So when we then say object.handle dot position, because it takes a vector 3 value, then in fact it should take object.handle.position here. My apologies. So we're giving it 2 position values because cframe is position and rotation, but it takes vector 3s here. So we're telling it where to be positioned, which is here, and what to look at. Then we can say camera.parent equals new template.viewport frame, and new template.viewport frame.current camera equals camera, just like that. Okay, so when we set the camera, then it will start rendering the object. Now, I hope this works. Let's go and test it out. And there we go. The items are there. They do, obviously some of them, they aren't, totally right. That is because the handle. So if you wanted them to be better, I would recommend that in each sword, in each item, let's take the gravity core for example, I would have I'm just trying to think about this. One thing I can think of doing is taking the position and then adding vector3.new, and you can add on some height or some rotation or position the camera to the side a little bit so it's looking down on the object. Maybe that will help. But still, you're able to see the item. Yeah, there you go. That makes it a little bit better. So each item is going to vary, of course, so you can't get it right for each item. But it is displaying the items in the viewport frame, which is good. You can obviously tinker around with those values there. It's just a very quick addition, a quick way of adding it on for me there. So play around with it. That's a very simple way of showing items in a viewport frame. I'm sure you'd be able to find out a better way of doing it. But there you go, a simple shop. That's what I wanted to teach you today, how to make a simple shop on Roblox. And if you want to provide some feedback on the text buttons, whether the transaction was a success or not, because we're either returning true or false, in the local script, if it's true, then you could say new template dot, if we just look here, if it was a success, we could set the background color 3 to a green color. So new template dot background color 3 equals color 3 dot from RGB, and you paste your green color in there. Else, if it went wrong, you could do a red color. So we'll do a red like this, copy it. I'm going to set it back to white, which is 255, 255, 255. I'm going to paste my red color in there. Then I'm going to wait about a second, and then I'm going to set it back to 255, 255, 255, which is white. So now, when you click it, it's going to return either true or false, and depending on that, I'll hide the template in a minute. You can see it's gone red because we already own that item. But if you didn't have it already and it was not in your starter gear, so if I was to remove it from your starter gear, and let's just remove it from the backpack, it would go green. So there you go. And don't forget to put the template, set the frame, template.visible to false, so it won't appear. The last little thing that we've forgotten to do is to add a button to make the shop open and close. So in the screen GUI, I'm going to insert a text button. I'm going to set the anchor point to 0.5, 0.5. And then I'm going to set, in fact now I'm going to set the anchor point to 0, 0.5, because I only want it to be perfectly centered in the middle on the y-axis, because I'm not going to be moving it away on the x-axis. So I'm going to set the position to 0, 0, 0.5, so it's middle on the y-axis, 0, just like that. Then I'm going to make sure text scale is set to true. I'm going to set the text to shop, and you can change the font if you like. And you can also change the color to whatever you like. Once you've done that, I'm going to just name it open or button. I'll call it button. And in the local script, just outside of any other code, we're going to say script.parent : wait for child button .mouse button one click : connect function. And we're going to say script.parent. In fact, we'll create a variable for the button at the top here. Local button equals script.parent wait for child button, and then we can just say button.mouse button one click, and then inside we can say button, not button. It will be the frame, won't it? So frame.visible equals not frame.visible, and the not will set it to the opposite of what it currently is. So if it's open, it will close it, and if it is closed, it will open it. So that is how you add the button to open and close the shop. Obviously my shop GUI doesn't look the nicest, but you can spruce yours up a little bit very easily. For example, if you wanted to change the color, you could set the style to custom, and then you could change the color. If you wanted to have a text label that said shop at the top, you could set the I'm going to put it inside a folder so that it isn't bothered. In fact, no, sorry, I'm going to put it into the shop GUI, but not in the frame. And you can just get the position of the frame and set it to the position of the text label. Set the anchor point to 0.5, 0.5, but change the Y so it's just above the shop a little bit, so at 0.2 or 0.15 like this. And then let's have a look. So the frame of the shop is 0.5 on the x-axis, so 0.5, 0, and then about 0.1, 0, and on the y-axis. And then if you do text scaled, change the text to say shop. And if you want, you can get rid of the border size pixel. You could set that color to be maybe a darker color, and the frame is a little bit lighter. I don't know, it's up to you. Mine's going to be white, as I said, like that. But yeah, that's how you can spruce up your shop a little bit. Obviously, you know, you can do a much better job than I have done. And also, one final thing. If you are going to have any GUI elements outside of the frame, then you'll need to also set the visibility of them as well. So, for example, script.parent.header.visible equals not script.parent.header.visible. And then if you make them both visible set to false, then they will appear and disappear when you click the shop button. Really, we should have designed it a little bit better so that you had a main frame and then you had all your GUI elements inside there. But you know, it's still a good working shop. And if you did want to change it so that your header and frame were combined in one big frame, then that is possible. That is definitely possible. So you could put the header in there, but then create a subframe inside of this one, and put the UI grid in there, and put the template in there as well, and then set the subframe's size to 1,0, 1,0. So it takes up the whole size. Or you could change the Y so that it maybe takes up 3/4 of the screen, and then you position it 1/4 of the way down at 0.25, and then your header could take up 1,0 for the entirety of the frame, and then 0.25,0 for the y-axis, just like that, and then get rid of that 0.15. And also I'm going to get rid of the anchor point on the y-axis. Okay, that might sound a little bit confusing, but basically what we've done is we've just we've basically changed the old frame and put the UI grid and template into a new frame that's taking up 3/4 of this big frame here. And then that way you wouldn't need to do this with the script.parent.header.visible stuff like that. But what you would need to do is, I'm just going to change the name of this frame to be item frame. What you would need to do is go into the local script, and when you're parenting it to the frame, we would say frame.item frame like this. And let's just see if we've used the frame anywhere else. Don't think so. So let's make the main frame invisible, and click the shop. Oh, it's not appearing. Let's just check that out. Let's just check that. See why it's not working. Frame.visible, script.parent, wait for child frame. That seems to be working. Ah, I know why. It's because I think it's hanging here. So it's saying frame, wait for child, template, but the template is now actually inside the item frame. So we'll say frame, wait for child, item frame, wait for child, template. Okay, so this is just because I've changed how my frame looks. And now then, there you go, they're appearing, and it will enable and disable. So that's very good. And as I've said again, you can play around with the UI grid layout if you want that padding. Maybe you want it to start from the center. It's all up to you how you customize the shop. I've just shown you a way of how you could customize it. But obviously, when you do start customizing it, you'll have to change your frame as well, and your script setup to make sure everything's still being depended on, because obviously it was depending on the template being in the main frame, but we moved it, so you need to update those sort of things. Anyway, that's the end of this video. If you'd like to take the source code, it's available to my channel members. You can click the join button below to become a premium channel member, and then that's available in my members Discord server. Just a way to help support my channel, although watching the video and copying it out yourself from the vid is a great way to learn. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Oh, and by the way, data stores are quite hard to debug if you're having problems with them. I'd recommend using the data store editor plugin by CrazyMan32 to help you look into them if you have any. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.